Today I'm going to talk about Chapter 3, Learning and Transfer. I'm going to talk about the five highlights of the chapter that I took away from it. So first is the importance of initial learning to effectively transfer it later. So teachers and students need to be aware of this because it definitely inhibits or prohibits how a student's going to learn and how effectively they're going to be able to transfer that activity to something else. There are different scenarios, so sometimes pre-learning definitely determines how successful they're going to be, but in other times it definitely inhibits them from being successful. Just to put it in context, maybe a student may have learned a method for solving a linear algebra equation, but only learned one strategy. So when you're teaching a different strategy to apply to a harder concept, they're not going to be able to learn it because they've only seen it structured in that one way. Second thing that I learned was the difference between actually understanding material and simply just memorizing it. So a lot of times I've been definitely done this before, just like being a college student, is just memorizing as much as you can, thinking you've really understood the material, but not being able to apply what I've learned in a farther context and more analytical arena. So definitely understand the difference between memorizing and learning. Whereas memorizing, you'll be able to answer questions like, what date did this happen? Who was the second president? Can you give me the order or structure of something, but not necessarily understand why it's ordered or structured that way. Just realizing, you can see the outline of it and you can put those names down, but not really understanding the difference. Another thing that I found interesting was the timing of learning. So definitely just understanding how long it takes to really go from being a novice to an expert in something. Studies have shown, especially with chess players, was highlighted in the chapter, was that it takes about 10,000 hours to become an expert in something. So if you think about how long it takes to get to that level, it definitely puts in perspective, what you really know about a topic. Ways to increase timing of learning was to don't learn in isolation. So rather than just learning a lot of different topics in isolation, being able to create like a connection or a weave so students can see patterns and decrease that time it takes to learn individual subjects so they can have a pattern or structure to follow already. And then one thing to plan for was just to initiate practice or recap time. This just lets the students see how they're doing in their progression and they can really provide feedback on their learning because sometimes students will think that they know something but not really understand it until they come to the exam time and it's too late. So creating those topics to initiate what they really have learned really does help a student. Fourth was the motivation to learn. So that definitely affects students' understanding and just motivation to learn the topic. So in the chapter, it discussed two different types of students who were oriented. So there's performance oriented and learning oriented. So performance oriented students really just cared about like the grade in the class or maintaining a certain GPA or getting this percentage on a test. Whereas learning oriented students really cared about really understanding the topic and being able to apply it not just in this class but to other classes and then later on in their career. And students can be performance oriented in one subject, but can be learning oriented in another subject. So maybe they really care about science and math and engineering, and they don't really care about really understanding creative writing. So they just try to, stay under the radar, just pass that class. The last thing, oh, my apologies. The way to increase motivation is to have students really feel like they're contributing to their learning. So definitely putting them in groups definitely helps. They can feel like they're really contributing, to the end goal. And then another way was to increase that was to make sure that you're giving them practical and useful information that they're going to learn about. And then that can apply later to their careers or something of a field of interest. Lastly is context. That's really just being able to taking what you learned and then being able to transfer that to another field or another scenario or application. So just taking things that you've truly learned, not just memorized, but learned, and then being able to apply that later in life and to see how flexible students were to apply that learning. Yeah, so those were the five factors in chapter 3 that I found specifically interesting from a student and maybe as an instructional technology educator. So those are some things just to think about.